Great.
Bruce, thanks for joining me today. Glad to have you on the Order of Man podcast.
Sure do appreciate being here.
Yeah, this is very timely. You came out with a book called Saving Our Service Academies, and I think it is not coincidence that you wrote this book, especially on the heels of information that up to, I think I saw a statistic that up to 70% of our young men in this country are not eligible to even join the military, let alone be involved with one of these service academies and then obviously joining our military. It's a rough environment for our military. It's a rough environment for our men, I think.
Well, I would agree with that. I was unaware of the 70%, but I know a lot of them are obese. They can't get through boot camp. That's one problem. I thought you were going to talk about something else, which has hit me over the more than the 36 years I've been at the Naval Academy, and that is that because so many marriages in this country end in divorce, many of the boys coming to the service academies lacked a father figure and are looking for one. So the unfortunate truth is that they don't find it, but they are looking for it. So I don't know about you're talking about probably physically unfit for the military. Maybe I'm talking about, I don't know, unfit mentally or hungry, certainly.
Yeah, I think that's the statistic I read is that they would not qualify without some sort of physical or medical waiver to qualify for military service. So I think we're
Which
talking
they've
about two
been
different
given.
cases.
I was unaware of the number, but I'm aware that boot camps have started out as I guess it's cruel to call it fat boy camps, but that's what they are. They take them on board knowing that they're not going to be able to hack it, and that's what gets them into shape. I guess that's better than nothing, right? I
I
mean,
hope it's a little scary with our readiness to fight in foreign conflicts or even domestic conflicts that are on the rise over the past 3 to 4 years. So I hope that they will get in the position when they're actually ready to fight, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case.
well, you know, we're kind of talking, it's called throwing a couple balls in the air at once. There's the physical side, which is sad, obviously, but I guess what interests me is a little bit more the mental side of the Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who is well known to a lot of people as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, which I reviewed for a publication in Washington called the Washington Free Beacon, and it's basically a hymn to the Marine Corps. And he he says he was raised by wolves. I mean, he wasn't physically unfit, but he was clearly mentally. He admits that's his story that he was mentally unfit, and he went to Paris Island, and it's like something out of 1935 took a boy and made a man out of him. So um, it still happens. I mean, the good news is that it can still happen. That was his story. Yeah, no, I mean, lot of kids out there that spend way too much time on the internet and not enough time running around the block.
But I think also with the mental readiness, you talk about the lack of a father figure and joining the military for that reason. I think part of the reason I joined the military right out of high school was to have some guidance and have some structure, and then the value of service to my country. Those were my primary motives for doing so. Uh, but it seems like anymore, the military recruiting agenda is to come find yourself or express yourself. And the military I knew wasn't to express myself, but to assimilate to a set of values and begin to adopt those values as my own, and then to be able to defend and protect this country.
What branch was it? Was it Army, Marine Corps, Navy?
Our Army
Well,
National Guard.
Army National Guard. Okay, yeah. No, obviously those are my values too. I guess guys come to those if they come to them at all via different pathways. I mean, the service academies are something else. They're not Paris Island. They're not boot camp. Um, and unfortunately, the gist of my book on that is that they don't find those figures that they're looking for. So I'm glad you did. Maybe enlisted is the way to go. It certainly was for J.D. Vance. I mean, I'm not going to talk about J.D. Vance's politics these days because it's irrelevant, but he certainly would say that it made him a man. Uh, yeah, I mean, aside we can tear our hair and wring our hands and say, well, why isn't more of this happening? But the military is not going to make men out of American boys more than the less than 1% it already has. I mean, it is less than 1% in uniform in this country. And of course, veterans are a much larger backlog, but currently 1% in uniform. There are all sorts of data about how after World War II, a huge percentage of congressmen and women had served in the military. Obviously, we'd just come off a world war, and now it's very, very small indeed. Um, and you have goofballs in Congress that, well, not just in Congress, but who denigrate that service. So it's a huge issue. I mean, as I say in my book, we have to consider the fact that the United States military or the United States hasn't won a war in 75 years. And it's not joining the military is not what it used to be. It used to have a clear goal. It used to have a clear purpose. Now, unfortunately, it's been spun off into play. I mean, a lot of boys, they're full of testosterone at 16, 17. They go to SEAL movies. They play uh, video games, and so on. And that's about as far as it goes. They don't actually do it. And then the unfortunate fact is that when they do, if they do enter the military, at least at the service academy, sounds as if you had a much more positive experience than many of the guys and gals I've had contact with. But they find that we're all about it. They're not. It's no longer about what you're talking about. It's because to some degree the military has become largely about show. I mean, it's women entered the service academies in 1976 against the wishes of the military brass, but that's what Congress said was going to happen. For the longest time, gay guys were thrown out. Now that is no longer the case. They've gone back and forth on transsexuals. Now they're in. So the emphasis certainly at Annapolis is it it's not on what it used to be. But I'm sort of the lightning rod for uh, all the guys that came expecting sort of what you're describing and found something else entirely. Way I put it is that they think it's going to be buds, like the SEAL training camp, and they find that it's a ladies' afternoon tea. It's all about not. It really is all about the things that unfortunately a lot of colleges are about, which is no microaggressions, don't look at somebody the wrong way, don't do this. It's all, words. Um, so it's the service academies are largely about show. They're not boots on the ground. It's not, they have 4 years, they're in the military in Annapolis, they're in the Navy. When they graduate, they're commissioned as officers in the Navy or Marine Corps. About 25% of our guys and some gals. Marine Corps has the fewest women of any of the services, about 9%. So it's mostly guys. And they spent 4 years putting on parades. So they come in, they think, I mean, I've had students that say to me, they they're told to address us as sir, which sounds I don't a little bit of that goes a long way with me. If you're not respecting me for who I am, I don't need the sir. But sure, throw it at me every once in a while. Why not? So they say, yeah, sir, some of them say, I didn't even know, they didn't even know, sir, I didn't even know that there were going to be college classes here. Wait, what did you not get about these places? You thought it was going to be Paris Island and Buds all wrapped into one. And the guys that I'm closest to, which are the hard charging ones, typically the ones who go Marine infantry, the ones who go SEALs, the ones who go EOD, which is the bomb disposal guys. They'll sit in my office, and either they're in my classes. They talk to their buddies about whose class should they sign up for, so they sign up for mine, or they just come, um, and they sit in the big red chair there, and they talk about how disappointed they are that they didn't find what they thought they were going to find. That it's really just show. So the service academies are a subset of what we're talking about, which is boys into men. But unfortunately, I would say that the service academies do not do that. Um, it's because it's all in Texas terms, it's all hat and no cattle. So they're frustrated. They're frustrated.
I actually was in the beginning stages of the application process for the Naval Academy and decided that I wasn't going to go that route. But sounds like that would have been an interesting route, to put it mildly, should I had gone that direction.
Well, I think you would have been disappointed. Most of them typically are. They, they come for what's called plebe summer. The plebe is the lowest rank. It goes sort of opposite of what the way it's calibrated in most places. It goes fourth class, third class, second class, first class. First class is about to graduate. And so the plebes, the fourth class, they come for a kind of a boot camp summer. But that's been watered down to begin with, and they do get disappointed uh, to the point where they undergo what I call the October surprise, because by October they figured out that the place is not what they thought it was going to be. I mean, the hard charging guys, the Marine infantry guys, the guys who go SEAL and so on, they kind of sit in my office and they just kind of go limp in the chair like this. And I say, what the heck, show me some spine. And they thought, I don't know how many times I've heard that they thought they were going to be surrounded by guys that they were going to have to really puff hard to keep up with. And that's not what we're admitting. So the reason that it's not what we're admitting is that we have basically racial goals. That's a subtopic. Let me just touch on it right here. I'm sure you're aware that the Supreme Court in, I guess it was June of 2023, outlawed affirmative action, admissions to race in civilian schools. But they specifically, Chief Justice Roberts specifically made an exception for the service academies. So
Hmm.
the service academies continue to admit not to quality, you
Merit.
might say,
Sure.
but to race. So, and I that knocked me flat, basically. Well, nothing knocks me flat anymore. Uh, but that certainly, the Brits say you're gobsmacked. I like that term. It means what? You're doing what? When I was on the admissions board in maybe it was 2005, and I discovered that we have these two tracks, and you don't have to be. Everybody uses the word stud in Annapolis. I've heard female professors say, "What you use the word stud?" Yeah, it doesn't have any sexual connotation. It means the guy is sort of what we're talking about, a real man, and
Sure.
so on. So uh, it's not their degree of studliness. It's do you check a racial box? So that's problem number one. Problem number two is uh, that they do have to do a few pull-ups to get in. It's not the puffballs cannot get in. But a lot of them really suck air during this plebe summer. And plebe summer has been watered down. The real hard charging guys sit in my office and they complain about what a walk in the park plebe summer was. They thought it was going to be Paris Island, where even, the quarterback down in Texas was going to have to really work his what's off to keep up with it. That's what they want. That's what they want. And they read these books, and it's not that. They have, oh gosh, I mean, I've forgotten the long list of things that runs are limited to 3 miles. And if it's bad air, we get bad air in Annapolis. A lot of places do. And they put up a black flag and you can't do anything outside. And they kind of they get all upset and they roll their eyes and they say, "Sir, if we're in battle and there's bad air, are they gonna make us stand down?" It's they had these dreams. I mean, this is essentially what we're talking about, that all guys of a certain age, we want to be put through the ringer. So by I mean, this just sounds so cliched, but it's cliched for a reason. We want to be put through the ringer by this huge guy who makes us sweat and who knocks us around. And finally, we please him, and he says, he gives us a bear hug, sweaty bear hug, and he says, in the Marine, welcome. All right, welcome to my Marine Corps. We want to pass the test, right? We want to make it clear that we've earned being where we are, and that is completely gone from the service academies. And from what I hear, it's going in boot camp elsewhere. Like I say, plebe summer is a joke. They have to run a PRT. They call it a physical readiness test once every semester. But to go back to the admissions board, another huge category that we take are recruited athletes, and you'd think that would be a good
Hmm.
deal, but intelligent, you got to have you got to have smarts. All right. we don't want dumb beef. We want smart beef coming out of the service academies. So the smarts part is if you recruit guys or gals for a specific sport that has that requires a specific body shape, you're not necessarily going to get all around physicality. In other words, the football players are going to be huge, lumbering guys, and they're just not going to be that physical. And I say, well, why are we giving a slot to a football player? I mean, this was another one of my axes that they I started writing about everything that seemed wrong to me. And supposed to be a tenured professor. I'm a civilian. Most professors at Annapolis are, unlike West Point or Air Force, for example. They do have a few, but most of us at Annapolis are civilians. And I'm supposed to be able to write, and I'm supposed to be able to, for places like the Washington Post or the proceedings of the Naval Institute. So I started writing about these things. We got a couple more coming down the pike in this conversation. One is the sexual assault tsunami. That's directly relevant to what we're talking about. And the most recent, of course, is the DEI, so-called diverse equity and inclusion, uh, which is also relevant to what we're talking about. But I started writing about the football team, which to the point where it became people would say, "Oh, I'd walk into class where half the class is football players," and and that happens because I've taught. We're undergraduate, right? But I've taught the whole gamut in just the 4 years, and the gamut runs from pre-college classes, frankly, remedial classes, to our honors classes. I've taught them all. So here I am in this remedial class, and these kids have all been sent to our prep school because they couldn't get in the regular way. Every service academy has a prep school. All this is military, by the way. Once you go to the prep school, you're in the military. Once you're at Annapolis, you're in the military, and it's all paid for by taxpayers. So what I'm saying about the service academies, uh, taxpayers ought to be paying attention because they're hugely expensive, cost about $500,000 per kid. That's 4 times what an ROTC officer costs and 8 times what an OCS officer costs. You can go to college anywhere and then say, "Hey, I want to be a Navy officer." They'll say, "Okay, we'll send you to OCS." And if you pass, it's 8 to 9 weeks. So a summer, you're an officer. And those two, plus what are called direct commissions, where adults who've typically gone to law school or med school join as typically 04s in the Navy. That's a lieutenant commander. Um, those are our commissioning sources, right? So you don't why do we have a football why do we have a D1 football team that we have to recruit big? Some of them have been brilliant, but some of them have not. What these big guys, why aren't we looking for the best all around material? No, we're not. We're looking for a football team that can win over SMU or Temple. So I walk into a class that's this remedial class. So it's remedial in college, and they've just come from a 13th remedial grade. All this is taxpayer money. Like how much can we remediate them? We're not letting in the best and the brightest. No. And they kind of they're waiting for me, right? And they say, "Oh, Professor Fleming, he's the one who hates the football team." I do not hate the football team. I love these guys. I love these guys. And typically those classes go very well once the ice is broken. And I do not think it is a wise investment of taxpayer money to give slots. And about half the class is what I'm talking about. So you think, I mean, you hear the hype presumably about best and the brightest and all around whatevers. And that's what they'll tell you. When I started writing about these things, like, what do we have a football team for? The big Navy, does not play football.
I
So
imagine the case for a football team, correct me if I'm wrong, is purely a recruiting mechanism.
no, it's that old saw about the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eden. It is relevant
Mm.
to what we're talking about here. It's this, it's the manly thing to do. Um, Big guys crashing into each other, and by golly, we're going to be Division 1, and the alumni like it. I mean, again, relevant to our topic, older guys like to see younger guys crash into each other. It just,
Of course.
it's a thrill. So, but should they be using those slots at the service academies for that? I mean, we could have a walk-on Division III team, no sweat. There are enough guys who played football in high school that we could do that with no problem. We'd play D3. What's the shame in that? No, they want to do D1. So that they say the pushback to my articles, and it's been for people who haven't read my book. Uh, I started writing about these things that seemed wrong, wrong, wrong to me maybe 20 years ago. I came to the Naval Academy in 1987. So I've been there on the books anyway for 36 years. Uh, I started writing maybe 20 years ago, just about after I'd gotten off the admissions board, and I just couldn't believe what we were giving our slots to. Um, and I couldn't believe what we were, even the slots that were competitive were just not that competitive. And I thought, well, wait, what is this place has got its priorities all wrong. So I started writing, and the administration didn't like that at all, to put it mildly. And it started with an angry 2-page letter about how it was unprofessional for a professor to write an article. Wait, that's what professors do. They write
Right.
articles and they talk about things. And it escalated through the subsequent 15 years through 2 official letters of reprimand that put me on probation for 2 years. Very bad boy. Investigations in scare quotes that were just completely cooked up and designed to they'd go out and they'd send out an all hands email to the entire, it's called the brigade, the entire student body. Does anybody have a complaint against Professor Fleming? Bring it to
Really?
us. Yes. So I was, the dean who was my nemesis, he's now gone. But he got his orders from superintendents. And I've actually heard as a PS, call me paranoid, that all this was coming from the Pentagon. You got to get rid of Fleming. He's making us look bad. So, the top kicks the one level down, and that kicks one level down, and finally the dog gets kicked at the bottom of the line.
Well, that
Uh,
that leads
so,
me to a question about what is the purpose of this? If we see this going off the rails, and I would agree with you in large part, not entirely, but if we see the direction of our service academies being denigrated and allowing other individuals that may not be the best of the best into these, which obviously translates into military readiness, why? Like, what is the point of this erosion of what we see as these incredible institutions?
oh, well, I thought you were going to ask another question. What's the point of the erosion? There's no point to the erosion. That's the sad part. But I think the real question is what's the I don't know why. I'm not sure what the question is. How do they continue to exist if they're, as I claim, uh, sucking air in on life support? And the answer is they're what I call the vanity projects of the military brass. They're military Disneylands. The brass love them because we're told that the chief of naval operations is the head Navy guy, right? Um, and we're told it's always been a guy. Just today, the first female superintendent of the United States Naval Academy was sworn in. So it's been, men all the way back. So we were told that the post of superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy was a consolation prize for the guy who didn't get the CNO job. So
Mm.
they love this stuff, and they themselves were all graduates. 20 years ago, they don't really know what the reality is, and they had no experience. They're to put it mildly, blithering incompetence. They're a Navy admiral, and they're supposed to be running what bills itself as a college. So they don't know what they're doing. And there's another problem with the brass, and that is that there's a joke that says once you make admiral, you'll never eat a bad meal or hear the truth again. And the
Mm.
bad meal, you're waited on hand and foot. You have servants. You got a chauffeur for the car. And everything is sir, 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 or nowadays, ma'am, ma'am, ma'am. But I'm talking about the sirs. Uh, why will you never hear the truth? Because the way the military is set up is in a series of what I think of as increasing bottlenecks. As in, the guy on the bottom has to, it's like the stack of turtles in Yertle the Turtle, if you remember the Dr. Seuss book. The guy on the bottom has to please one level up. and he has to police one level up, and so on, all the way to the top. And at each level, there's pressure to not tell the next level up bad news. So it's you tell them. I mean, I've had countless students say to me, basically a version of if your CO commanding officer ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. You find out. I had one guy who was an NFO, which is the backseat guy in a airplane. There's the pilot and there's the NFO. Class of 1990, great class. I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys. In fact, the guy who was the temporary superintendent while Tommy Tuberville, coach, was putting a hold on promotions, who just stepped down today. His name is Fred Kacher, and he was also in that group. So I can chalk up one admiral. But anyway, another guy in that same class, the NFO guy, he said, "You find out what your commanding officer wants and give it to him."
Mm.
That is not the way to win wars. And what happened to me at Annapolis was I was making them look bad, or I was saying things they didn't want to hear. So the places look great from the outside. Even you considered it for a while. They're gorgeous. They're physical. I mean, Annapolis is pretty. I think West Point is, but ugly. But that's just me. It's in a pretty place. It's on the Hudson. I mean, no prejudice there, right?
Exactly.
It's on the Hudson, which is beautiful. In the fall, I've been there in the fall. You just look out at the leaves on the other side of the Hudson, and that's gorgeous stuff. That's really gorgeous. But the buildings are awful. And it's an hour north of New York City, and there's nothing around it. I mean, whereas Annapolis I compare it, I was a Fulbright scholar in West Berlin, so there's a wall. You can walk up to the wall and touch it, and you can go through the wall if you know how to do it legally and so on. So there's a wall in around the Naval Academy, and you can walk up to it and touch it. And there are houses that look down into the yard. It's called. So it's the place is it's so accessible. It's in Annapolis, which is our state capital, Maryland. It's less than an hour from Washington, so it's a tourist destination. The students, they're 18 to 21 or 22. Some are a few of them are a little bit older there are kind of exceptions that allow, but they can't be older than 23 on what they call I day, induction day. So let's say
Got it.
23 plus 4, 27 is the absolute. They have to run this PRT, what I'm talking about. They are inspected in their uniforms. The guy's hair is short. They can't, lie half naked on the grass. There's a place where they can do that. It's on the roof of their dormitory, Bancroft Hall. They call it the Red Beach, which is hilarious. It's a red roof. They're there but nobody sees them, and tourists just flock to us. They're beautiful. The question on the table is why? What are we doing with these places? And the answer is they're military Disneylands. They're a Potemkin village, if you remember what that is. That Catherine the Great's, I forget exactly what his title was. He was her general that took the Crimea for her, incidentally. He's supposed to have put up uh, wooden facades of really spiffy looking houses in front of the crappy peasant dwellings that she would
Mm.
see from her coach. So she'd be in the coach and she'd look over there and it would look like, everything was hunky dory. That's a Potemkin village. That's the service academy. I know that West Point is the same. Check out the book by my counterpart at West Point. His name is Tim Bakken, Bakken. His book is called The Price of Loyalty. I have to admit, he quotes me a lot because I've been writing for far longer than he's a professor of law at West Point. Uh, and they're the same. They're like in Texas terms, like I say, they're all hat and no cattle. So that's not where men are going to be, where boys are going to become men, and the girls are just as disappointed, incidentally. Um, I mean, I'm going to let you focus on anything in what I've just said that interests you. Any or all of it. The sexual assault things are really bad. But
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
We'll get into that. I do want to ask, just to go back to my previous question and maybe ask it a different way. Is the reason that we see this erosion, is there an agenda to undermine the military or these service institutions? Or is it, for example, the inevitable outcome of the culture, the degenerate culture that we live in? Or is it just ignorance and incompetence?
I would check the last box, which you haven't noted, which is all of the above. The
Hmm.
ignorance and incompetence I've already flagged. And what infuriates me is, look, I I've taught between 3 and 4 thousand students. I've talked to hundreds of them. I know what they actually think. I mean, we're trying to talk about a short story in class, and they'll all they want to talk about is some crazy thing that happened that day and how little respect they have. I could tell these people things. So that's willful ignorance. Instead of that, they punish me and shut me down. So okay, you're not going to get your information that way, and that's troublesome because that translates to the military and from the military. The equivalent of me is some grizzled Marine guy in a forward operating base who sees just how bad things are going in, let's say, Afghanistan most recently. And he'll probably get through to his platoon commander because they live together. These guys sweat on each other. But is the platoon commander going to be able to get through to the guy ahead of him, or the guy ahead of him, or the guy? No, at some point, this buffer system. That's why we haven't won a war in 75 years. So this is not just about me at Annapolis. This is about problems, I think, endemic problems in the military. But to answer the rest of your question, partly it's our culture. Um, and partly it's because the part that I can fix some of this. I mean, just my fingers are itching. Just let me do it. Let me do it. And I can give you the short list in just a minute if you want it. But I mean, there are some immediate fixes that would make things better, not perfect. But the service academies have lost their way because far fewer officers come from the service academies than used to. After World War II, it was close to 100%. Now it's down to 1 in 5,
Hmm.
not even 18%. So, and of course, they go on to the students about the best and the brightest. They tell them that multiple times every week. And the students don't believe it. The midshipmen don't believe it, but that's what they're told. So you better hope that's not the case because that means that 82% of the rest in this case, the Navy and Marine Corps are subpar. There are no data that show that these guys and gals are better officers. And so that's one problem that the world has changed. And two things: the world has changed and the service academies have changed. Now I'm working on the world that's changed. The number of officers that come from service academies has dropped. And that is because ROTC has been beefed up so radically. Um, there are, for example, twice as many ROTC Army officers as there are from West Point. It's about the same in Annapolis, but the Navy is much smaller than the Army. It's about a third of the size. Same, Marine Corps is half the size of the Navy. The Navy and Air Force are about a third of the size of Army. Um, so the world has changed out there. We're not going to have any more D-Day landings. All right, the same. We do have some guy, and I'll just stick with guys who are doing what the movies think soldiers and sailors do.
Sure.
That would be, in my case, it's Marine infantry, it's the SEALs, it's
Special operators, right?
EOD, those guys, the ones that make your heart go thump thump when you think, oh my God, are they really doing this for us? It's like, what did I do to deserve this? And by the way, that's been the joy of my life that I get to interact with those guys. Um, but most of the Navy and Marine Corps has got a lot of things, right? And Marine Corps has a lot of planes, for example, but nothing wrong with being a pilot. Um, the Navy has got what they call SWO, surface warfare. They're on the ships, and that's a really thankless job. And what they do is, it's not what you think of. So now we win wars by drones, by artificial intelligence, by where's this is our topic, where's the macho in it, right? Especially in that you're right. That's not how well, it is to some degree how we try to recruit them, which is why they're so disappointed when they get there and find that that's not it at all. But warfare has changed. And the Navy in Iraq and Afghanistan, we lost something like 7,000 service members. 224 of those, I looked it up, were Navy. So
Hmm.
Navy is in ships. And I've been in ships, but early when I arrived at Annapolis, they would send the civilian professors out on ships And I went on a sub, which was really cool. They even let me drive it. I can't believe that, but I guess there was nothing. There was nothing to hit. Um,
They gave you
the
the fake wheel
torpedo.
and the real guy was on the other side or behind the curtain.
It must have been that. It must have been that. But it was the craziest darn thing. Oh, that was an experience, believe me. I've written about that in my first book about Annapolis, which is called Annapolis Autumn. I think you can still get it as an ebook. But so the problem is that warfare has changed and it's not all male. It's now something like 40% women. Go women. I mean, I have a mother, I have a wife, I have a daughter, all those good things, also two college age sons. Um, so I want to be a good father too. I read the blurb on your blog. Um, but you're right. The it's all about I'm sitting in Philadelphia right now in our apartment. I actually live outside of Annapolis, but on the way into town in Philadelphia, you turn off 95 onto 76. Signs say Valley Forge, which of course means something to a lot of us. And there's this big billboard of a woman in Marine Corps getup, and it's all about she's found her place in the Marine Corps. Okay, nothing wrong with that. The whole can she carry a 200-pound guy if he's wounded, blah, blah, blah. But you're right. It's inclusivity, but it's inclusivity to some degree out of desperation. No service is meeting its recruiting goals. And to go back to your question, what's going on with the service academies? They decided they wanted to be like the cool kids. They decided that they were going to move with the times. I have nothing bad to say about moving with the times, only they never admitted that that would cost something. The guy to read,
Hmm.
the old guy is Jim Webb. I don't know if you James Webb, who was the Ronald Reagan Secretary of the Navy. He was a
Okay.
senator from Virginia, and he's also an author. He wrote a book about Vietnam, but he also wrote a book about Annapolis called A Sense of Honor, and that was and he's notorious in feminist circles for having written an article that he did not slap a title on. So, as I say, hold your fire. But the title is Women Can't Fight. That's not what the article says, but it does make the point. It was written in 1980, which was the first year that women would graduate from the service academies. And his point was that if you put a, any number of women, starting with one, that's probably even the worst, into an all male battalion or group, you're going to change the chemistry of the group. The
Of
guys are going to
course.
start. I mean,
You
it's
see
like
this with
what?
11-year-olds, let alone, 18, 20, 25-year-olds.
Sure. And, especially if they're far from home and, they don't have any other partners. So the guys are going to start. The best thing that could happen is that the guys are going to start showing off for the girl. They're not going to treat, and they say, no, just treat her as one of the guys. Well, really?
No.
No, no. So James Webb is writing in 1980 about the problems and all of those, of course, came to pass. And I've talked to women from the first classes, not the first class, but the first several years at Annapolis. And the way they were treated was you wouldn't want your daughter treated that way. I wouldn't want my daughter treated that way. I mean, it was really crappy. Understandably, I mean, they plop these women in the middle, they do nothing to accommodate them. But some things had to change. So the guys, it took them a while to get over that. Now the pendulum has swung to the opposite extreme, and that's the sexual assault training, which was the marquee uh, topic maybe 10 years ago or under the Obama administration. Little fill in here. The Obama administration announced that Title IX, which most of us understand is saying, hey, women can play ball too, let's have women's sports, rah, rah, was going to be used on college campuses to say that let's say a guy and a girl have what the guy thought was consensual sex. And the girl, even weeks later, even months later, says, well, to tell you the truth, my girlfriend's convinced me that I felt pressured into this. She
Right.
makes a complaint of sexual assault. And that was what all anybody could talk about 10 years ago is there were reports from Congress. The service academies are required to put out a yearly report. A yearly report. I think it's biennially for the Defense Department. Sexual assault in the ranks. it's like, wait, you didn't see. First of all, you have way too. I've written about this. You have read my book. You have way too broad a definition of sexual assault. You go to the UCMJ, obviously it's the bad stuff that is already illegal. I mean, rape is at the end of that. But it's
Sure.
also, quote, unwanted physical contact. So I read a pushback to this, and I'm going to steal a phrase from it. What about what guys would call a test kiss? As in, things are looking pretty good. Let's see how it looks if you kiss her. That if she didn't like it, or if she decided the next day she didn't like it, or the next month, that he could be charged with sexual assault, not just
Assault. Yeah.
harassment. Assault. And harassment is even murkier. Harassment is it's not pulling your pants down in public. It's making, and it's not, like the bad old days of guys making sexist comments. All of a sudden now we have women on submarines. You're presumably aware of that. That was one of the last holdouts. Submarine waters are like this. I've been on
Right.
submarines. So you brush too close to her in the passageway. Most girls most women, they're rational, and they're not going to bring accusations of sexual assault or harassment. But if one of the guys kind of rolls his eyes at, wow, she's got a pair, or isn't she? Talk about some hot actress, that can be reported as sexual harassment. So the definitions were just way too wide. But it's like, who didn't see this coming? That's the problem with the service academies.
Right.
Just who didn't
Of
see it
course this is
coming?
going to happen.
So they didn't deal with it properly. I have a metaphor for that, and that is that when my daughter was young, I would have her sometimes after hours, so she needed to go to the bathroom. So I would go with her into the women's room, otherwise deserted building. And the men's urinals were still there. And all they changed was, the sign on the
The
door that
sign. Sure.
said the women, but nothing else was done. So, except, so the women felt pushed out and the guys felt resentful. I mean, it's a lose-lose situation. But some things have now, as I say, you might say, gotten with the program and they've gone to the other extreme. And the other extreme is what I'm talking about here, that the girl has only to, make the claim, and immediately she's called the victim. Of course, the military didn't invent this stuff, but they imported outside agitators, I call them, outside advocates. Uh, and that's the vocabulary that we were trained in. I mean, I had to go to mandatory faculty. It was, there was officers to the left and right, and faculty civilians dressed in this kind of clothing. And they told us that all these things were sexual harassment. So they've just gone way too far in the opposite direction with that. They don't know. They didn't want the women. Okay, you got women. They never sat down and said, well, how is this going to change? How it has changed, and the guys, these hard charging guys that are the biggest complainers and the most disappointed, the most alpha are the ones who are the most disappointed by the
Of
service
course.
academies, in
Sure.
short. And they complain to me. They say, you can't. Again, this is Jim Webb's world versus our world. I don't think we can't return. The question, this is a big question, so I'm still working it, of what's changed. Is it the academies? Is it the culture? It's both. The academies wanted to play the same game as the rest of culture. We didn't give a bachelor's degree until the 1930s. We didn't have majors until the 1960s. We didn't have women until 1976. We didn't, Don't Ask, Don't Tell disappeared in what, 2013, something like that. So in that period, if you even intimated that you were gay, you were immediately thrown out of the
Right.
military and the military academies. So I have to say, I mean, it's a normalization of the service academies. So I'm not going to pass judgment on that. But what I do pass judgment on is the fact that what it does is it makes the pot boil more, and this DEI diversity stuff makes it boil even more because they delineate kids into racial groups, and they give preference to they give preference not only racial but gender. They give preference to women over men in disputes. And the boys are aware of that. There was a big article in our local newspaper, which is called the Annapolis Capital, about how justice was tilted towards women. Now justice is tilted towards the minority students, the non-white students, not only in admissions, but they're desperate to keep them. So what it does is create divisions. You can speak, I think, from experience. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I would bet serious money that unity and cohesion is the basis of military discipline. You have to do it as a group, right? And what we're doing is introducing all these divisions. Of course, they're doing it at Harvard as well. Everybody's been I think, been following the Harvard DEI stuff. But the military, if the military is divided, Abraham Lincoln quoted the Bible, house divided against itself cannot stand. That's what we're doing with the military. I
Well,
mean,
it's
not just the
interesting to
service academy,
me. It's interesting to me that in order to address racism and sexism, we incorporate and adopt racism and sexism. That's a bit ironic, to put it mildly.
right?
But the frustrating part of this DEI agenda is it's all based on immutable characteristics. I mean, I can
Right.
certainly understand how diversity could be considered a strength if we have a differing opinion or perspective or experience in life, but not based on the melanin in your skin, not based on
Right.
your biological makeup. That's nothing that you can change or have any control over. It's nothing you earned, even.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the problem with DEI is that it's imposed at the service academies, it's imposed with the power of the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of
Mm,
Military Justice. And it's at a civilian school, maybe they can, I don't know what they do to the kids that, microaggressions they get lectured at is what happens. But they can
right.
actually be punished with the using the UCMJ. They can be at the worst possible case scenario, they can be court-martialed and
And
sent to
imprisoned.
jail to the
Sure.
brig. So it is you've put your finger on. I'm a writer. I've written more than 20 books. This is only the most recent one, and I got up minutes before I turned on my computer to talk to you to work on an article that I'm trying to finish on precisely DEI and the paradox that it is exactly what you said, that it divides into groups ostensibly to address the fact that people are being divided into groups. So if you impose these things from the outside, if you have at Annapolis, let me just talk about Annapolis as opposed to Harvard. You there's Mando training. Okay, so it comes out, Mando training today at Odark 100 or something, and a lieutenant commander is going to stand up and tell the midshipmen who are all in the military what they have to do, what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say. And the guys, they don't even this is me trying not to look at the guy to my left. There's no guy to my left, but they're sitting there, they can't even roll their eyes. They can't even roll their eyes. So they just kind of they do that thing, where they, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And they listen to it, but it sets one group against the other. It is completely bird brained for the military and it's counterintuitive logically from what you're talking about at the Harvards of the world, but it's counterproductive in the military. So we have Houston, we have a problem here. They want to, you said, the question on the table, maybe we're wrapping it up, is what's changed and so on. Well, society's changed. Congress wanted to see women at the service academies. I don't know if you geographically what you're close to, but at VMI, which is the state of Virginia's military college, they were told also they had to have women, and they said, well, can't we have a women's leadership institute at another college? And no, you can't have that. You got to have women right there. uh, so okay, fine, we're going to have women at the service academies, but it's going to change them. It's going to change them to you want to have you want to have 40% female. And here's the paradox: anything remotely so-called PDA, public display of affection. You cannot hold hands with your girlfriend if you're in a uniform on the Annapolis campus, or indeed technically on any military installation. Uh, you can't, which means you're not supposed to be having sex in the yard. but they do. They go out to the graveyard, which is a little desecratory, maybe. But where else are you going to go? Or they hope they don't get caught in the in the Mother B. They call it Bancroft Hall, which is their common dormitory. All 4,500 of them in one building, huge building, a lot of wings, but one building. Um, they and they can be punished for it. So it's wait, you let in women and you remove PS, you remove the stricture on gays, and yet you forbid any sexual contact. Like they're 18 to 21 or 22
Right.
typically. They're full of hormones. What, if you want to play the game of the outside world, you have to do some things differently. So at the end of my book, I do suggest some immediate fixes. And one is, we've got to change the status of, like, the no sex rule was not a problem until 1976 because it was all guys. And, gays were not tolerated anywhere in the military. So, of course, somebody's doing something, but we're not asking, we're not telling. All of a sudden women come in and they've kept the same strictures. Those things need to go away. So that's the world has changed, the service academies have changed, and they're marching forward with blinders on, like a horse's blinders, not realizing that they have failed to change. They've failed to add two and two. And they have to get four, but they apparently haven't done that. But the guys, the hard charging guys, they're roped in. This just breaks my heart. The hard charging guys are roped in with all this, hoorah. If you look at the recruiting videos, or there was a movie called Annapolis, which wasn't even shot at Annapolis, but a lot
Right.
of shirts off boxing, and you want to see ripped guys knocking the crap out of each other. That's just what guys want to see. They all love the movie Fight Club, by the way. I can tell you the movies they
Who
love. They
doesn't?
love that
Who doesn't love Fight Club?
300, anything with these chiseled guys, Gerard Butler and so on. I mean, they just swoon over that stuff. But which they could not actually shoot at Annapolis because there were things that contravened the UCMJ in it, like
Mm.
a student hit an officer. So I can understand why the brass said no on that one. But they watch movies like that and they think that's what it's going to be, and they arrive and it's an egg walking on eggshells thing of, don't say this to somebody, don't object when somebody who's clearly, I mean, God forbid you should object when somebody who's clearly less competent gets elevated to a student leadership position for reasons that seem pretty clear to most people, a skin tone or a gender, what they got below the belt. And the guys, it just bums the guys out. So they don't find, the bad news is that they're not finding the masculine role models that many of them come looking for, and it's no longer what they used to be.
Is
So
this
I don't
is
know.
this a situation that you feel like eventually, we scrap the thing, or is this something that isn't even redeemable?
Well, obviously, I've had to ask that question over increasingly with increasing frequency and increasing intensity. The solution that I offer at the end of my book, which is called Saving Our Service Academies, that was not my title. I think my title would have been a little more negative, but think about it. People don't not scrap. I can't sell a book that's called Scrapping Our Service Academies. I think that I mentioned earlier that there's some potentially quick fixes. Uh, what the United Kingdom did with Sandhurst is one very definite possibility. And what they did was to get out of the undergraduate education business and use the facilities for graduate courses of 8 to 9 months. So you go to college. I think that would be a good solution for the service academies. It would be sort of a generalized version. The Naval War College does not fit that bill. Naval War College is for people writing specialized dissertations on why Napoleon's campaign and so was superior to somebody else's campaign and something else. So, but what I imagine is that you would either go through OCS or ROTC and very disparate experiences, which is precisely the diversity we're looking for, if you ask me. Plus, it gives them 4 years. You have to go to college to. There are a few exceptions, like some of the guys that come up through the ranks, Mavericks, and so on. But mostly, you have to be a college graduate to be an officer. So you go to college wherever, and you sow your wild oats. Let's hope, and you get some of the piss and vinegar out for the guys, And the girls learn to deal with guys, which is a big deal about, men and women. There's a women's side to it as well, which is I have a whole series of, imaginary lectures for, well, they're not so imaginary because I delivered them one-on-one to female midshipmen about how do you deal with a guy who does X and Y. You make clear what the boundaries are and you enforce them. All right. I mean, guys are they're gonna try to push the boundaries. They just
Of
are.
course.
It's their self-image, our self-image, right? You don't want to feel like a wuss to yourself. So that's
Well, there's
where,
also a level of risk taking for a perceived reward, and that's generally more attributable to men than it is women.
sure, sure, absolutely. I mean, plus it's fun and it defines us as who we are. But there's a whole lecture to women. This is not quite where I was going a second ago, but I can come back. What to do with the service academies, make them into Sandhurst. And I'm gonna put my finger on that point because I'm gonna come back to that. That's one option. Then there are a couple of shorter term options that I also want to add. But what do I say to women? Nowadays, um, I've written this. Is it okay if I talk about just hold up
Yeah,
this other book that
absolutely.
I've written called Masculinity from the Inside? And that my it came out, I don't know, a few months ago. So that's also required reading, ladies and gentlemen. There will be a quiz. Uh, Unfortunately, it's kind of expensive because it's an academic book from an Anglo-American publisher named called Routledge. But my starting point for that was um, I started looking at the so-called gender studies departments in dozens of universities, mostly American, but some. And what I realized is that any theory of men on the table that gets knocked around in academia and bleeds out of academia to politicians is feminism. It's, they now call it all, I mean, 99, I think maybe even 100% of certainly of the so-called gender studies departments that I looked at started as women's studies. And then they said, oh, well, we have to be more inclusive. So let's call it gender studies, right? And there'll be a picture of the class and there'll be, 25 girls and women, young women, and one guy sitting there. And there is gender theory written by men, but it's mostly men who have been, I don't want to be snide about this, but they've been basically co-opted by feminism and their
They've been
solution to
feminized, of course.
okay, all right. So I can use that word. Their solution to excesses of male activity is to make men more like women,
Right.
which I don't approve of that, and it's not going to work. So why don't we just think about how else to think about this? So I decided that I had to come up with a theory. Again, the title is Masculinity from the Inside. The subtitle is Gender Theory's Missing Piece, as in why don't you listen to a straight guy a smart straight guy, I think I'm pretty smart here, um, who's been around the block and who can articulate how men actually do, how we see ourselves. And I realized that to make my point clear, that men were not going to get that discussion from gender studies. They weren't going to, because those are all basically feminist studies. And feminist studies are very important. I'm certainly in favor of women defining women, but women defining men is not going to get it right any more than their accusation was that men defining women wasn't going to get it right. And they're probably right about that. So fine. They did it themselves. We now have library shelves grown under feminist literature of women defining women. Let's have some men defining men. So that was my starting point, realizing that there essentially was no correct description of what it's like to be a man in academic terms. I mean, we all kind of do it by feel, right? We grow up, uh I mean, I've had guys sit in my office and say, "Oh, hey, sir, I got a guy crush on somebody." They all, like I say, they all love Gerard Butler. We're all about, pecs and arms. Uh, you go through your guy throughout crush phase. You if you don't have a father at home, typically it's the coach in a sport if you're lucky. You piece it together by taking role models, but it's not an intellectual process. That's my point, that there's no theory of men. Okay, so what am I offering in play to fill the void, right? That there's just nothing there. There's no, that's
Hmm.
gender, this is gender theory's missing piece. And I think the center of my intuition was to realize that uh, may, men are okay. We let's go to let me use the sexual harassment, sexual assault thing. The perception of people of women looking at men from the outside is that we're big hairy brutes that will do absolutely anything, and we have to be squashed back into our box with these draconian measures. The at Annapolis, it was the guys would sit in my office and tell me about the training that they'd been subjected to, where they had to basically agree that gang rape was wrong. Excuse me? I mean, I think they know that gang rape is wrong. That's not the kind of situation I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is at a frat party, the girls will get all dolled up and come to the frat party, and they have they have a skirt that's way too short and a blouse that's cut way too low, and they're all made up and they're all flirty. Does that mean they want to have sex? No, but it means greater availability than a soberly dressed woman sitting in a restaurant having dinner with her family. All right. So women have control over what signals they send. Uh, if you're not interested in sex, I'm not saying don't get all dolled up, but be aware that if you go to a frat party looking like that, the guys are going to be thinking certain things, and they're going to try because their masculinity is on the line for them. Um, so if you I guess it's justifiable that you get all dolled up and not really want to have, anything like that go on. It seems like an odd thing, but uh, if that's the case, then put on make the skirt shorter, make the skirt longer, put on a jacket, and just be more businesslike. I mean, give the right signals. Women have to be taught. Women have some control over this because feminist theory with the sexual assault business is it's all the men. It's all the men. The woman does nothing to invite it, and the men are all just going to roll her over. So I wrote a whole piece for a sociology journal that I incorporated into the book that I just showed. Um, that I think I invented anyway, the concept of male, what I call no-fly zones. And as in, we know whom we're not supposed to come on to. Uh, it's just the edges of the things that get a little dicey. Like this girl, we're 20, I'm 20, she's 20. She's come to my frat party. She looks like that. We're closer to does she want to sleep with me? Unclear, but it's giving more signals that maybe yes. That's that's edging towards a fly zone. But we all live in no fly zones. To get gross, I have a mother, I have a daughter. I have work colleagues. Those are all no fly zones. I'm perfectly well aware of those. So no, I am not as a male, I am not ungovernable. I know what those are. But so what we have to tell men is to be aware of getting towards the edges of these things.
Sure. Right.
Um, and you have to, there are gray areas in a lot of things. I mean, I don't read a lot of the advice columnists in the newspapers, but the ones that I do, they're almost invariably women, by the way. Men, in the old days, the joke was that men would never ask for directions. Now that's not a factor if you just look at your phone. But they'd be lost in the middle of nowhere with the map out in front of them, and the wife would say, "Honey, don't you think the time is coming? There's a gas station. Let's ask for directions." No, I'm gonna get out of this. We're gonna do this, and so on. That men, the agony, the Brits call them agony aunties, which I kind of like. All these advice columns are from people who are edging towards the gray area of all of our all of our social conventions. It's like all of us know the things that are absolute no's, and we know the things that are probably no's. But then there are things that in the non-sexual realm, it's like, oh, I know I should have written a thank you note for a present, but now it's 3 months later. Should I still write the thank you note? It's like it's gotten gray, right? So you don't know. And the agony auntie always says, yes, write the damn note. But men can guide men about the gray area. I mean, first of all, to make it clear to them that everybody has these no-fly zones. So, gentlemen, and I assume a man talking to men, gentlemen, you are, not out of control thugs. We know that. But you have to be aware of the following situations. And there are some that are genuinely puzzling to younger guys, especially. I mean, everybody's focused on colleges. When you get to be my age, you know what the rules are, right?
Right.
You don't put your hands in the wrong place and so on. But in
I
college,
like
they're
the
just
idea
learning.
of I like the idea of obviously men teaching other men. That's what we're doing here. But I would like to get back to the other solution that you had suggested,
Sure.
and then we'll wrap up for today.
Okay. The other solution is I think that we should turn them into sandhursts. That's the big picture thing. But the short version is I was invited some years ago to lecture at the Canadian Service Academy. They only have one. It's a lot, all their services go to the same one. They've rejiggered their system. They used to have a couple of smaller ones, but now they all go to this one, the Royal Military College, and as a pressure situation, it is much more livable than any of our service academies because the students they're not patrolling the sex. Number one, the students can be married. Ours can't be married, so they think of it as marriage is a hoot. But you might agree with me. It's got its issues. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted. So all of our students think marriage is great, and they all get married. A huge proportion of them get married in the days following graduation. And of course, the divorce rate is exponential because they don't know what
Sure.
they're doing. And so they can be any age at the Canadian Royal Military College, as long as they can, do the push-ups and stuff. Uh, and there's no wall around it. They can live off campus. It's much more civilianized. So the girls, there's a panoply of uniforms anyway because it's many services. Um, but it's just much more relaxed. So we could institute those changes tomorrow. You just say, okay, they no longer have the legal status of Navy midshipmen. They have the legal status of ROTC students. They can come, they can go. I mean, logistical problems. It's like I say, it's right in the center of Annapolis, Maryland. So where are they going to live? If they can live off campus, well, other colleges solve that. We've got to, if you want to keep them as undergraduate institutions, which I don't think we should, because I think they're untenable for all the reasons that I've mentioned. Where they're trying to civilianize without civilianizing. So
Mm,
uh,
right.
just loosen the reins. Um, but that's not. I don't see that happening because we have 20 years ago. I suggested that what we needed as a president, it's called the superintendent. Now it's this admiral, this female admiral who's just come in, but male admirals, they don't know squat about higher education. They don't know what they're doing. They're 3 years away from retirement, and all they want is for the ship not to sink. So they're not going to change anything. They just
Right.
want
Don't
to keep
rock the
it,
boat.
keep it, don't rock the boat. So what I'd suggested was, I even had a name to drop. My wife went to an all women's college, Wellesley College, outside of Boston, and the president of Wellesley College was a woman named Nan Kahane, who subsequently became the president of Duke. And she was one of the first women. Now they're all the Ivies and Ivy levels have women presidents. We saw that at the congressional hearings. But it was Nan Kahane. And I said, offer Nan Kahane the moon, anything she asks for, get her to be the president. And she would have, I imagine that she would have a military XO, typically a Navy captain. And if there was something she didn't understand, she'd turn to the captain and say, Captain, why are they doing this? And if the answer wasn't to her satisfaction, she could dig a little deeper. And
Right.
maybe she could maybe she could get rid of some of the rot. Maybe she could blow away some of the dust, and she wouldn't have graduated from there. She wouldn't be beholden to the alumni, to the tradition. So that's what we're doing. They're these empty vessels of, they claim we're keeping traditions up, but they're actually nothing like what they used to be. So,
Well,
Houston, we have a problem.
how do we learn more about what you wrote in the book, the solutions? Where do we get a copy of the book and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, it's published by Post Hill Press, which is Nashville and New York, but it's distributed by Random House, so it's everywhere. It's going to be in books. It is in bookstore. It came out on Tuesday, the 9th. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of your ordering sources. The other book that I mentioned, The Masculinity from the Inside, unfortunately, you just Google the title. Unfortunately, it's going to cost a little bit, but maybe you can get it from your library. So I, love to have interactions with people who read them and who have something to say.
Great. We'll sync everything up. I really appreciate your work and exposing some of this because that needs to be addressed. So I appreciate the work that you're doing and anxious to get this information to the guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, I appreciate it. Take care.